Hello everyone, I'm Nicola Pogson, Head of Alumni Relations at Imperial College Business School, and welcome today to one of our webinars, our career webinars. These offer ongoing professional development support to alumni wherever you're based and proving very popular. I'd just like to remind you that if you want to take charge of your career, you can also book an appointment with our career professional development team, and who can give you one-to-one consultations on campus by Skype, phone or email. So we're there to help and support you, and I know that you're going to get lots of valuable advice from David today. David has had a career in HR management in a variety of industries such as financial services, retail and shipping. And he has been HR Director in Thorne & Legal and General, where he specialised in talent management. Since 2001, he's run his own business as an executive coach and consultant. He works with senior executives to improve their performance and facilitate work on strategic issues in the insurance sector. He's also taught career planning and HR strategy at Oxford Brookes University Business School, and he has an MA in coaching. So we're going to hand you over to David just very, very shortly. I just wanted to give a couple of housekeeping announcements. This webinar will be recorded, so you will have the opportunity to obtain the recording later. And you will also be able to ask David questions. We hold questions until near the end of the session, and we ask you to ask them via the Q&A function. He will also be happy to answer any questions you may think of after the webinar is over. So David, over to you with your insights on this very important question, managing a career change.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and welcome everybody. It's nice to have the opportunity to talk to you today. I know we've got a very global audience, so whatever time of day it is, a particular welcome to you. Let me just start by setting out what I thought was a good agenda for today. And I thought we would discuss, firstly, something I've called Job Business Matrix, which seeks to really prioritize some of the issues involved in making a career move. Secondly, the all-important issue of motivation, your motivation for doing this. Third, we'll look at making links to relevant people, marketing yourself, and finally the route to market, i.e. the route to getting the job that you're looking for. I'm also going to, possibly under that last heading, also comment on transition from employed status to self-employed. A number of you have already asked questions, and this is beginning to look like a theme. And because it's a transition I've made myself, then I thought it would be useful to dwell on that a little bit as well. So I hope that somewhere in there is some topic that is of particular interest to you. So the first area that I'd like to just talk about is just to discuss this matrix here, which I've called the Job Business Matrix. And what this seeks to do is to explore the relative difficulties of making transitions in our work. What you see in the bottom left-hand corner, where it says same job, same business, is your starting point. So this is a bit like snakes and ladders, but this is where you start from. Same job, same business. And the further you get towards the top right-hand corner, you'll notice the colors get darker, which is meant to identify the degree of difficulty that is encountered. So if we move from the bottom left, if you move to a same job in a similar business, then that's a relatively easy transition. So let's say you were a marketing manager in Coca-Cola and you wanted to move to a marketing manager in Pepsi, then that's going to be a relatively easy business change to do. Then you move up one, same job but at a different business. So a marketing manager and let's say another sort of FMCG type company, maybe another drinks company, or it may be a retail company, something like that. But very much in a marketing role, maybe looking at brand, etc., the same job as you were doing in Coca-Cola. If we work along the bottom, then again, if we move from marketing manager in Coca-Cola to a similar job in the same business. So this is moving from being a marketing manager maybe to being a brand specialist, something of that sort, but very much in the same business, maybe in Coca-Cola, and then a different job in the same business. So moving from brand manager maybe to an HR role or a planning role in the same business. So that's going to be a relatively easy sort of transition to do. And I won't go through every single box, but if we look at the top right, I guess this is the box which represents maybe your interests in attending this webinar today, which is how do we get to be in a different job in a different business? Because clearly if it's a different job, so we're no longer in marketing, no longer a marketing manager, so this might be something like an HR manager or a company secretary or something like that. And not only have we got to manage that transition, but we're moving from being in Coca-Cola to something like Dow Chemicals. And that is the biggest, most difficult transition to make, and that's the sort of transition, or at least the route to that transition, is what we're going to talk about this afternoon. So my first area that I thought it would be just worth exploring for a few minutes is why consider changing career. You may be feeling it may be very comfortable where you are. You're obviously well known, and I hope are doing a good job. But something has clearly stimulated you into wanting to make a transition. And I've listed some points there which are possible reasons for making a transition. And what I'll do is just comment on their value if you were to describe these as motivations, maybe to somebody you've met at a networking meeting, maybe to a potential employer. So the first one is better salary. I think I would mark that down as a reason for saying you want to move job. And the reason I would say that is because it implies, A, that your primary motivation is simply financial and nothing else. Secondly, it also implies that if your salary falls below your expectations in the new job, then you'll be off again. It doesn't imply that you're the sort of person who's going to grow and develop in the new business. Also, of course, you may remember back to any management studies, motivation, salary is not a very good motivation for the long term. So I would say, even if that is a true motive, I think there are better ones that you could use in terms of describing your motivation to move. Second one there is greater career prospects. I think that one is probably a lot more sound in terms of a reason for moving. However, if you are moving from a large company, let's say Coca-Cola in that example I just used, to another company, then there will be a question mark in the minds of any potential recruiter as to why you weren't able to develop your career in a large company. So it does raise some questions which you would need a good story to cover. Because lots of big companies, as I'm sure you're aware, have some management development programs, they have talent programs, and if you say that you don't feel you've got very good career prospects, it does imply that you're not part of that community which is included in a management development program and or in a talent program. And some of you may have heard me talk before about building your career in-house. And a new company will want to really just explore a little bit why you haven't been able to develop your career, why you haven't been able to make a transition in your current company. But provided you can come up with a good rationale, then greater career prospects is a pretty good reason to want to move. Thirdly, you have a poor relationship with your current boss. I think of all the ones, that's the least useful one to use. I'm afraid that however genuine that is, a new employer is likely to be very suspicious about that and is likely to side with your current boss or current company in thinking that there is probably more to it than you're describing. So despite, however true that factor might be, I think it's very definitely one to avoid talking about. I mean, more long-term potential is a pretty good one, and is probably one of the strongest ones in this list, because, as I'll say in a minute, the long-term potential could imply the way the market's going, the way the company's going, and to align yourself with long-term prospects in a new organization can only be to the good. So I think saying that you're moving and want to make this big transition to get better long-term prospects is probably one of the strongest. As is sort of better fit with skills. I mean, that, on the face of it, sounds a pretty positive reason to move. A very cynical recruiter might say, well, weren't you aware of that when you took the job? Weren't you aware of that at the time? And I think you'd need to be able to show that maybe the role, company, market, profession has changed or failed to change in ways that you have developed, and therefore this mismatch has arisen. Because otherwise people will be a little bit skeptical as to why you took the job in the first place. Something that is part of that better fit with skills is the whole question of transferable skills. And I know a lot of people, when they're thinking of making big career changes, place a lot of emphasis on transferable skills. And I certainly think that there is an element of value in using the concept of transferable skills, but there are also, I think, some limitations. If you just talk about things like, I've got very good analytical skills, very good problem-solving skills, the problem with that is you're probably going to be finding lots of people who've got that and relevant industry experience, which you lack. Better fit with skills such as influencing senior people and able to demonstrate that, excellent client relationship skills, particularly in a similar sector, so maybe in a business-to-business or business-to-consumer context, skills with financial management, particularly maybe in cost saving. These are the sort of more specific generic skills which lots of companies would value, and particularly the three that I've mentioned. And they would fit with very different environments. I think also one has to really put in this area cultural factors. So if you recognize that maybe some companies are very fast moving, some companies are much slower by virtue of their product. So I've worked in retail, which is very fast moving, and I've moved to insurance, which took, in the time I went there anyway, a very long time to really analyze new products, etc. So it felt like a slower moving organization. And so if you have skills in adapting to fast moving, for example, in the new context, then that would be a useful thing to emphasize. The next one, to say the new area is more exciting. Again, it's certainly not bad, but equally it does sort of imply that what can you do in your current organization to make your role more exciting and more innovative and more interesting. So yes, to a degree, but I would be very cautious about doing that. Next one is you're moving in order to get less pressure. And one of you has already asked a question about this because you're feeling that you need to change careers in order to get better work-life balance and less pressure. In the vast majority of cases, I would say that's a bad idea. Even those companies which talk about, they espouse a work-life balance, their idea of work-life balance may not fit with yours. So, for example, a good friend of mine worked for a large consultancy company, which had better remain nameless, and they worked flat out for about 3 or 4 weeks on client assignments, and were then probably told on a Thursday lunchtime that they could have a long weekend till Monday. Now, whether that meets your definition of work-life balance, it certainly enabled that company to promote in their literature that they were very mindful of giving people a balance in life. But of course, what they really meant was, when you're with a client, your life goes by the board. When you're not with a client, you may have some time off. So be very careful about that, and I think in most cases, to promote that as a reason for wanting to make a change is unlikely to be a welcome change, because people are going to get very worried about your commitment, etc., etc. You may want to ask some questions about that a bit later on. And finally, there is to correct a mistake in your choice of career. And that is a perfectly easy thing to do. I myself found that I moved from a company which was being in a very poor state financially to one which was absolutely awash with money. And I thought this was going to be a great move, and it turned out to be a disaster. And I always felt that one mistake is probably okay. 2 mistakes is getting a bit more than an accident, and any more than that, forget it. So I think you could talk about having made a mistake, provided there are some good, credible reasons, maybe better than the ones I cited, some good, credible reasons for doing so, but probably not something that you would lead on, maybe something that might come out in a later conversation. So to sum up, I would suggest that in deciding why you're changing, I think you need to create a sort of balance sheet between what you could achieve by staying and what you could achieve by moving, if you could manage the transition and create a sort of balance sheet which is personal to you. And be very clear and have a very positive story about your motivation to make the change. It must be a very enticing and engaging proposition, not a defensive one about you want to get out of where you are. This is much more about you want to go for new opportunities and challenges. And so what I've done on the next slide is just to sort of talk about some of the things that you might promote in terms of your move, rather than in any sense try and explain it in the terms of negative features of your current role. So, firstly, be very interested in the possibilities of the new field. So if you want to move from a marketing manager in Coca-Cola to something in, say, renewable energy, then it's very important that you can demonstrate excitement about that possibility, and that can come across as really genuine. And to be genuine, it has to be substantiated. So how could you do that? Well, if you think back, as long as it's not too long ago, to your days doing your MBAs or MSCs, maybe there are aspects of your studies when you were at Imperial that really excited you, that really triggered some new interest and really stimulated your mind when you were here. So that might be something that you could refer to, although I'll put a strong caveat on that in a minute. Also, of course, the projects that you do here. I mean, one of the big advantages, certainly latterly, of doing MBAs and MSCs at Imperial is the flexibility of the courses. So to be able to say, well, I actively chose, in that example, renewable energy, and really found that fascinating, would be a strong reason. And of course, your cohort. If you can say that you were very stimulated by some of the work that your cohort done, members of your cohort, and these possibilities were really exciting to you. So there are some opportunities in reflecting back on your time here, provided it wasn't too long ago, to talk about how your interest in the new area was stimulated. But it's one thing being stimulated by the possibility of working in renewable energy, but it's another thing being able to demonstrate and validate that interest. So the next bullet point, which talks about subsequent work, is really saying, well, what have you done since, in this case, MBA, what have you done in terms of follow-up to this realization that you want to work in renewable energy? And I know some people think, well, goodness me, I'm working flat out doing my current job. I'm flat out being a marketing manager. I haven't got time to do lots of other things. Well, I'm afraid that it's a hard message that this is a difficult transition that you're seeking to make, and I'm afraid putting in the hours doing this sort of work is vital. Because you have to demonstrate that your desire to move out of your current field and current job into a new one is genuine and is not just something that you've sort of invented. So, and is a sort of recent passion. So it's very important to try and get involved in some way or other, be that in your job, be it on working parties and that sort of thing. But if that's not possible, maybe to join some voluntary organizations, that might be useful to demonstrate your commitment. I've also put down on there conferences. If you can attend conferences, achieves two things. One, it will enable you to generate some current knowledge of the territory you want to be in, and secondly, it will get you known, give you wonderful opportunities to network and maybe get some contacts and really find out more. Also, blogs these days, make sure that you're reading blogs from well-informed people, maybe some on the BBC website, for example, blogs from people in your chosen new area. Because these are a great way of looking at what's going on, who's saying what, and look at the comments. Try and comment yourself on some of the content of the blogs. LinkedIn might give you opportunities to join groups and participate in groups. Joining a group by itself is really of very little value. The value comes in active participation. And some of what I'm talking about can be summarized in building a reputation. If you can start to build a reputation in the new area, then this will stand you in good stead as you start to talk to people, as you start to make these transitions. And of course, finally, they're reading around, doing as much reading as you can of relevant newspapers, maybe magazines, books, etc., so that you're well informed in the new area. Now, all of this is aimed at it's demonstrating your commitment, and B, of course, hopefully it is kindling and stimulating your interest in making the sort of transitions that we have in mind. It is hard work, and I don't deny that. It's going to take up a lot of work, it's going to take up a lot of hours, but of course, as MBA and MSc students, you're used to that, so it's about maybe thinking back to those days and adopting a similar approach. Let me just talk also about the staging, the word at the end there, by which I mean making the leap from being a marketing manager in Coca-Cola to being a corporate planner in a renewable energy company just may not be achievable in one move. And it may well be that you have to plan that through a series of stages, which of course implies that the timescale will get extended. So the sort of thing that I have in mind might be that our friend, the marketing manager in Coca-Cola, has identified that he or she would like to work in a chemical company in HR. How would you make that transition? Well, it's possible that the first transition could be to a marketing consultant in one of the large consultancy firms, which operate the sort of matrix which enables you to move both professionally and in terms of industry specialization as your expertise develops. So from a marketing consultant, it would be quite feasible to become sort of organization behavior, people management consultant within that large organization. And I'm thinking of companies such as Accenture, PwC, Deloitte, etc., those large companies with multiple industry and professional representation. And from being an organization behavior consultant in a company like that, it may then be a relatively short step to becoming an HR manager in the chosen company. Now that sort of transition is not going to be quick. It's going to take a long time, but it is achievable in that sort of a way, and it is achievable through fairly formal means of applications, etc. And I'll touch on that again in a minute. So, linking connecting something with I've just said, let's just look at how you can make the sort of linkages that will be important. And this is really about thinking about the demands of the new role, and in what way can you find that you have a sort of relevant experience and maybe knowledge to connect you to the new role. And I put down some of the things there, that you have worked with similar clients to the new company and or job that you're interested in. You might have international experience, albeit in a different market, but nevertheless, if you know about, for example, doing business in India, it might help if you're working, or if that's part of the new role that you're looking for, albeit it may be in a different sector. One of the most important things is possibly to demonstrate good client-facing skills, good ability to influence and get business and retain business through excellent client management skills. So this would be, again, a strong link between something that you've done and something that is one of your goals. And as I've said before, some of the skill sets, analytical skills, although you have to be careful about that and really be able to give some good evidence of that. Influencing, and particularly I think at senior level, would be important. And one thing that you might want to reflect on is your ability to assimilate new information and situations quickly. If you can show that you can demonstrate that you have that expertise, then that is by itself going to be an important factor in making the transition. So let's just look at the crucial question of how can you market yourself to a potential new employer. Well, the first question there may sound a bit brutal. Why should a new employer recruit you in preference to someone with a more traditional CV? So taking our friend in Coca-Cola who wants to move, say, to Dow Chemicals, why would somebody prefer a person with a background in Coca-Cola to someone with a background in the chemical industry and indeed in HR? And that is not a rhetorical question. You have to know the answer to that, and you have to believe in it and sell the benefits. And the reason I've written benefits in large letters is that in my experience, lots of people will describe the features of their experience. So I've done this, I've worked there, I've worked in India, I've got excellent client-facing skills. But, you know, what's the benefits of working in India? Sell the benefit of doing that. That you understand about the culture, you understand about the bureaucracy, you understand about some of the current pressures and some of the activities which the Indian government are doing to try and stimulate the economy, etc., etc. So sell the benefits of what you say, not, well, in addition to the features of what you say. So you have to think of reasons for this person in Dow Chemicals. What can you offer that the traditional CV or the traditional person cannot offer? Because that's going to be the incentive for the recruiter. And they may well be looking for people with more of a fast-paced background. They may well be looking for the people who have the mentality of brand and rapid communication in order to stimulate the environment in which they are. my own experience having joined an insurance company in the early 1990s, very quickly that company, with the challenge of direct insurance, very quickly that company had to make enormous changes from being a very long-term, staid business to being much more fast-paced. And in the time I was there, the time taken to produce a new insurance policy went from 18 months to 3 weeks. Now, my background in retail meant that I could understand the need for the pace that requires. And it's not just pace in one part of the organization, the whole business has to respond to the challenge of that need for speed. And it was stimulated, as I say, by Direct Line and other direct insurers, and that transformed the insurance business. So if you know that a company that you're aspiring to join is faced with the sort of challenges for which you could make a contribution, then there is a very clear incentive for a recruiter there to prefer your background to a more traditional background. Excuse me, I just need a glass of water. And that can be encapsulated in the idea of what is your unique selling proposition. And that pulls together some of the things I was talking about earlier in the form of your motivation, what you can offer, all your interests. You can demonstrate that you have not just thought of working in the chemical industry or working in renewable energy, but you can list the sort of activities through attending conferences, reading blogs, responding on LinkedIn. You can demonstrate that your interest is genuine and profound and long-term. And in doing that, in fact, your passion for the job may well be considerably greater than people who have a long-term commitment or a long-term career in that business. So there are lots of reasons why a recruiter might well be interested in the difference that you would bring to the business. And as a talent manager in the past, we were looking in the company I worked for, which was Legal & General, we were looking for multifaceted people in the company. We were not looking for functional specialists. We were looking for people with a diversity of abilities who could move and respond to the changing needs of the business. So again, a new company which was looking to develop its talent bank would again may well be interested in the opportunity to recruit someone with a very different background. So selling the value of what you have done is important. At no time apologize. So it's no point saying, well, I'm afraid I don't know much about the chemical industry. I mean, that is patently obvious. What you have to do is to sell the benefits despite the fact you don't know much about the industry. And in my experience, if you can establish a personal relationship with somebody, and that is a very positive experience, they will be much more willing to compensate and overlook some of the negative reasons for recruiting you, because they see in you someone they can do business with, someone they can work with, someone who's going to bring some extra qualities to the new organization that they couldn't find elsewhere. So this ability to assimilate new ideas, assimilate different cultures, make an impact quickly is very, very important and needs to be demonstrated. And the final point on that slide, the future orientation. It's very important that when people are looking to recruit you, that they're looking to recruit you for a future scenario. It's hard to think of you fitting in to a current scenario where probably the importance of current experience, current knowledge are going to be outweigh your ability. But if you can sell your ability as I'm a person for the future because I'm very interested in the way renewable energy is going, I'm very interested in the way chemical industry is developing, and there are some connections between what I've done in the past and where this business is going, and I can make a contribution to that. That sort of orientation is very important. So it's about I understand this is my skill bank, this is where I've come from, this is the qualifications I've got, and I can make a contribution to the growth and development of your business. So let's just finally look at some of the issues around routes to market. And I think this might be a good time, if you've got some questions, to start submitting them in the Q&A area of the webinar page, so that I can then respond to them when I've concluded. But this is really addressing, it's all very well having this wonderful idea of where you want to go and the passion, etc., to get there. How are you going to actually land the job? And the first 2 bullet points I put down there are, I thought I'd get the negative ones out of the way. Applying for a job that you see advertised on a website or in a newspaper through a recruitment consultancy is going to be probably the most problematic area. Generally, particularly if you have no relationship with the recruitment consultancy at all. Because generally speaking, they will have a list of criteria that they have agreed with their client for a person to enter this new job. And if you don't tick the boxes, and then you're unlikely to get any further. So the same probably applies with just a direct approach to a company without any job being advertised. They're not in recruitment mode. They're not going to bother to think carefully about what you're proposing. So those 2, I think, are very problematic, which leaves us with networking. And it seems to me that because of the personal nature, or even the virtual personal nature of networking, this is going to be by far the most important area. Because what it implies is that the reason people might take a risk with you, and it's likely to be a risk, is because you can talk to them, you can convince them, you can demonstrate in front of them your passion, you can find some connections at a personal or business level to promote your value to them in this new and exciting role. And that seems to me the most plausible way of making the sort of radical transitions that we are discussing this evening. So what I'm talking about here is not a casual campaign at all. I'm talking about something which is very much organized, so that you identify the sort of people that you would want to start talking to, and every time you meet with new people, that you seek a couple more names off them from their contacts, that you follow those up, etc., etc. And I would guarantee that after a little while of doing this, you'll be talking to people who are doing things of which you have very little, if any, knowledge right now. So it's a great way of extending contacts, but what is likely to come of it? Well, certainly it's quite possible that there would be actual jobs in forthcoming as a result of doing this. Certainly, my experience of working with MBAs here is that has happened. Secondly, you might be asked to do a project or a short-term piece of work in the company. Now, that can be useful, but I recognize that if you're currently in work, that can be difficult. But thirdly, it also extends your knowledge and across a much wider range of activities. And that might lead you to change the emphasis of your campaign, change the emphasis of what you want to do. But the fact that you are meeting with people, the fact you have contact with people, and they will be impressed by you is by far the most important thing that you can do. It does imply keeping in touch with them. It does imply follow-up and creating a sort of longer-term relationship, because otherwise I'm afraid people tend to have short memories. So sending them information, keeping in touch by email, at least 2 or 3 times is very important. Also, networking at conferences relevant to the topic and area that you want to go to, and as I've mentioned earlier, LinkedIn. All of these ways are ways of talking to people, explaining to people, and talking to people about the story that will be convincing from why you want to move from your current organization and your current role into a new organization and a new role. And that piece of work can't be underestimated. That is the sort of core of what you have to do every time that you meet people. And it has to be done with passion and interest and enthusiasm. Let me just finally then just say a few words about my own transition from employment to self-employment, and then I'll address some of the questions that have started to come in. So my own experience was that I was working and had worked entirely in large organizations until 2001, when the talent role that I've described in Legal & General moved to another part of the country, which I didn't want to make that relocation. So I thought, well, rather than move to another company, I would take the plunge and become self-employed. And since then, I have been more or less self-employed, because clearly I work here at Imperial part-time on a salaried basis, but I still maintain my own consultancy business. So my own personal experience in making that transition was that the first thing, of course, and you've heard this before, is that you don't get a salary check come in at the beginning, the end of every month. And that can be quite daunting when you first start. And somebody said to me that as a private sort of coach and consultant and trainer, I needed to have funds for 12 months before I could rely on fee income to maintain my lifestyle. And that seemed like an awfully long time, but turned out to be almost exactly true. So I started to get paid remuneration, but it couldn't support me for 12 months. Also, of course, the enormous length of time between meeting somebody and actually getting paid invoice off them. One company I started working with, it took 18 months before I did my first piece of work, and then another 4 months before I was paid. And, you know, they turned out to be my biggest biller by a long way. But there was very regularly I thought, what am I doing this for? Why am I bothering? But something made me hang in, and obviously it turned out to be very rewarding in both financially and professionally. So maybe patience, hanging in, finding reasons to keep in touch with people is another skill. Also, cash flow. I worked out the cash flow possibilities of being an executive coach, which meant an enormous amount of marketing, enormous amount of contacts to generate some actual coaching clients, until somebody offered me a one-day training program, and I thought, hey, that sounds, from a cash flow point of view, like a much better deal. So I started then to change my business plan to be a trainer and a coach and consultant, which meant that I could manage my cash flow in a much more favorable way. Also, I never knew I was a marketeer until I started working for myself, and marketing constantly. And I realized that I had to have a very, very specific proposition. So although Nicola introduced me as an executive coach, which is true, I pitched myself entirely at medium to small insurance companies, and I always pitched myself to the chief executive and never to HR. That's a very deliberate decision, because that's where my USP is. There's very few people who can say they've been a director of an insurance company, who've got an MA in coaching, etc. And therefore, there's nobody who can compete on a level playing field with me. Also, of course, is the whole proposition. So it's not only about what you do, price you charge for it, the niche you're going for, and the USP that you offer. So marketing, I think, and getting those things very clear. In my opinion, don't try and be a generalist. You have to offer specific niche products to whatever your target audience is. And final point is, of course, you're entirely responsible for your own personal and professional development. And people who retain you and pay you a fee want to think they're dealing with people who are very much up to date, high levels of skill, etc., etc. And you don't go on training courses at somebody else's expense. You have to do that yourself. So that can come as a bit of a shock, and did to me when I started out. So I hope that was useful. That really concludes what I wanted to say by way of presentation. What I've tried to do is to identify some of the ways in which you can make the transition from the very bottom left-hand corner of that original matrix right up to the top right, be it quickly or possibly by stages.